I think that that's the key is looking at assessment and how can we authentically assess that. And if we're going to be assessing content, I think we're assessing the wrong thing. So the first thing is start looking at what are the skills that are involved in that content. And then once you identify what those skills are, then it opens up the door to what type of an assessment that might look like. I think that too often we exclude kids from that process. So the other recommendation I'd make is have a conversation with kids. Hey, we just learned about polynomials. How do you think you could demonstrate to me that you truly understand a polynomial and that you can put it into the context of your life? And the kids are going to come up with some great ideas. But you know what? We just talked about another tool that's fabulous. We have AI out there.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to this podcast. I'm Chelsea Dean. I'm the curriculum director at TomoClub and your host today. For generations, the measure of a good school has been tied to test scores, GPAs, and graduation rates. But in a world that's changing faster than ever, is that still enough? What does it truly mean to prepare a student for a successful life? So today we're exploring that question with a leader who is tackling it head on in a small but mighty district. We're joined by Mr. Shane Ogden, the Superintendent of Park County School District #16 in Meeteetse, Wyoming. With a background as a teacher and a principal, he brings a classroom-first perspective to defining student success far beyond the report card. So, Mr. Shane, thank you, and thank you for accepting our invitation, and welcome to this podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for those nice, kind words as well.
So I think I would just like to jump into it. We know that you're
Yeah.
been doing a lot of great work. So we know that your district's vision is to develop respectful individuals, independent thinkers, lifelong learners, and future leaders. So how does that vision challenge the very traditional grade-based definition of student success?
Yeah, I think for when we look at our education system, we know that it was created in order to have great workers in the labor market and in industry, in the steel industry, and in the factories. And part of that was assigning grades to seat time. You became a very good student if you were able to accomplish what the teacher wanted you to do, but it was always just in rows. It was on your own. So often it's interesting today that what we call collaboration at one point was considered cheating in school. And yet that's the world that we live in, is with all the amazing tools and everything that's out there. I think we have to stop thinking about education as working towards becoming a valedictorian with the GPA of 4.0 and moving on to college. And I appreciate that so many of our universities are starting to recognize portfolios as well as a GPA or a ACT or SAT score. And I think that really shows that even in our higher ed, in terms of learning, that switch is starting to happen. And I think it's happening because globally, that's what's needed in our world today. Is kids don't need to know calculus, but they need to be able to think critically. They need to be able to problem solve. They need to be able to have creativity and think outside of the box. And I think one of the most important things that we're losing is communication skills. And oftentimes we think that it has to be the in-person communication, but look at us, we're talking over Zoom and creating an amazing podcast. And all of that are skills that even 10 years ago would have been seen as not of value. And yet today it's our reality.
I think one of the things that I'm thinking about while you speak, or at least while you were speaking, I'm constantly thinking about the term generalist, right? Like we're constantly thinking about how do we give students the opportunity to grow, or at least become critical thinkers, become collaborative leaders, and facilitate peer interaction even in schools as school leaders, right? What do you think?
Yeah.
Uh, how sometimes, and this is up for dialogue also, how sometimes the education system sets students up to become generalists, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that when we again as we reflect on where we've been and where we're going, um, there was some great research done some years ago, and I think NASA was one of the first ones to do that. The research that looked at creative genius in kids and how that creative genius was so high with the kids that they tested at a kindergarten and first grade level. And as they progressed throughout the years in our traditional education system, that creativity genius just kind of started falling apart because we teach people how to stand straight in a line, or that you have to color inside the lines instead of coloring how we want to. And education systems have been in the mode of compliance rather than learning. One thing that I love that we're doing here in Matitsi, again, very rural, small school district. We have one pre-K through 12th grade building. And so it's been pretty, well, not pretty easy, but it's definitely been easier for us to transition away from traditional learning into, we're focusing in on project-based learning. And with that, it's giving our kids an opportunity to want to have some voice and choice inside their education. So no longer do we just need to learn the laws of Newton's laws of physics, and be able to regurgitate those on either a multiple choice or an essay. But now the kids have to build something to demonstrate it, and give them the choice and give them the opportunity to use that creativity, that problem solving, to say, how am I going to show that an object in motion is going to stay in motion unless acted upon, by an equal or greater force? And it's time for us to start recognizing that kids no longer are going to be benefited if we just sit and get. But they are our students today, truly are going to be the revolutionary people in the future. And in order for them to do that, they've got to understand AI. And they've got to understand how we have to be able to critically evaluate everything that we see and hear, because there's no telling if that is true or accurate anymore. So, how do we teach them to use AI in an ethical way? But if we're always saying, oh, you can't use AI because you're going to plagiarize an essay is a crappy way to evaluate a student unless you're looking at their writing skills. If you're looking at content, we should be treating everything as if it's a doctoral dissertation. And you've got to defend your learning and make the students recognize that they are a partner in their learning, instead of learning being done to them. That they are partners with us in their education. And when it's meaningful to them, it'll be something that sticks for a lifetime rather than just until the next test that we take.
I absolutely love this one statement that you just said about uh, treating all of the assignments, or at least how we've been treating all of the assignments as doctoral thesis or dissertations. I think one of the things that I'm taking back from this is, or at least what is coming to my mind right now, you mentioned about how we would want students to even have access to AI, right? Like, or at least because they are the ones who are going to be the revolutionary leaders, or
Mm-hmm.
leaders in the future. So, just from that perspective, what would you say, like as a lifelong learner today, what does how does understanding these tools help them, right? Whether it's AI or
Yeah.
it's technology overall, because we're still talking about evaluation, right? We're still saying that
Right.
you're in a space that is constantly evolving. What you have today will be very different from what you've had maybe 3 weeks or 3 months back, right? So everything
Yeah.
is evolving at a pace where everyone's trying to catch up. So, how would you say that benefits or does not benefit students?
Yeah. So when we look at again, traditional schooling and everything like that, it is so structured, and it's such a way that the teacher has always had to be the expert. And now we're learning that, computers and cell phones that we carry around with us compute things so much faster than what we do. So why do we keep letting content be the king?
Mm.
Right. I think that's traditional is, you know what, you're going to take algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, calculus, and it's about the content. It's not about the skills. So if we start thinking about what are the skills of all of those, and we start thinking about spatial learning, computational understandings, and I was a German teacher when I was teaching, and as a German teacher, man, it was so critical that kids got their verbs conjugated right, because I didn't want them to sound bad, or like they were truly an American. And so when we take a look at what we've always focused on, we always leave out the skills and we focus in on the content. And I think that that's the big shift that we've got to make is content is not king, but skills is the future. So how do we empower our kids? We were talking about AI. We were talking about how do we use the technology and the tools that are out there and are available for our kids. Well, if we're saying you can't use them, then we're handicapping them for their future. That they're not going to be able to stay up with what's happening. And truly, I think that it's our job to help kids understand ethically using the technologies that are continuing to develop. How do you ethically use social media? For a 14-year-old kid that just discovered TikTok, that's a whole different world for them. And yet there's great learning that can happen. There's great positives that can happen. But too often we're seeing in today's day and age that everything becomes either political or it becomes, instead of being for anything, it's anti everything. And I think that part of that has been established through our schooling systems. And so it's time for us to shake that up and just say, you know what? These are tools, and let's teach you how to use the tools, to think critical about the things that you are seeing on there and hearing. And our kids are smart, and we don't give them the credit that we should. That oftentimes kids spot a fake way faster than adults do. And so for us to think that they're going to be brainwashed by anything, I just don't buy into that sentiment. I think that our kids are pretty astute and pretty critical, and we have to allow them to do that.
I think one thing that I'm hearing right now is, of course, keep kids at the center of what you're doing. And I think from that, when you're keeping your student at the center of learning, you're still giving them all the possible skills that they are going to require for their future, right? So giving them those future ready skills that are completely transferable in any area of their lives, right? Like, so whether you're talking about, say, computational understanding, or whether you're talking about critical thinking, or creating inferences or analysis, anything of that sort. I think one of the questions that's coming from me at least, we conduct professional development for teachers, right, on AI and on newer technologies and all of these things. So, one of the things that we've seen coming up in our survey is regarding, like, one of the challenges has been around, say, identifying AI, or at least AI in content, right? It's becoming one
Mhm.
of the major problem statements for educators right now, because they feel that they're at a space where they're unable to identify AI. The AI detectors are, of course, not reliable for sure. But
Yeah.
then, if content is not, so since what that's what you were saying, right? Like, content need not be the king. How do teachers go around evaluation if this is the
Yeah. So I go back to, we have to stop, or maybe let's make it positive. We have to start assessing in authentic ways. And I think one of the best ways that I've seen that we've started to embrace here in Matitsi is students having to defend their instruction, or their learning. in math, when any of my own personal children have to pass off a particular skill in math, they schedule a one-on-one time with the teacher, and the teacher gives them three problems on a whiteboard or on a paper, and they have to verbalize their thinking. So when we talk about metacognition, thinking about thinking, we're teaching our kids how to vocalize that. So as they're doing a problem up on the board or on a paper with the teacher, they are vocalizing what their thoughts are. Why are they doing this? For the first time, our math teacher can understand why a kiddo made a mistake. Instead of, oh, well, they got this wrong. I don't know where they got it wrong. But now we're able to identify that, and that teacher can reteach at that very moment. And so if we're doing a book and kids are reading a book, it used to be, oh, write an essay. Well, even in Google Docs, there's AI assistants that are going to help you write that. I don't have to have perfect grammar in anything, even on my cell phone. Autocorrect oftentimes gets it wrong, but we still that technology is developing. So why are we assessing that? We want to assess what the kid learned from that book. So have the conversation. And then you're able to ask those probing questions and see how much did the student learn? Are they able to apply what they read in this book with content that happened in a social studies class? It's pretty cool. One thing that we did this last weekend, our students got to do a presentation at the Full Scale Symposium. So we were in New Orleans. And so we took a whole morning and we went to the World War II Museum. Amazing museum. And as the kids went through, and we just cut them loose, and they were going around and following their whatever seemed the most exciting to them. Following that, we filmed them, and they had to individually talk about what was impactful to them. What did they learn? So our kids were getting social studies points towards a credit while not in school, while out exploring and doing stuff. I think that's where we need to start to get is learning happens everywhere in life. And so let's stop thinking that a grade has to come from sitting in a desk.
That's extremely valuable. I think one of the things that I'm taking back from this exact question that I posed is about finding unconventional ways to assess your students, right? To actually put them into a situation where they're able to also vocalize themselves or vocalize their thoughts and verbalize how they're going through the process of learning, right? So you're not teaching them how to learn and what to learn is something that you're still bifurcating. Then you're not pushing them in one direction, which is great, right? It also gives teacher enough space, and correct me if I'm wrong, it gives the teacher enough space to actually understand the student and build a deeper relationship too.
I love that. I love that you point that out. That's one of the things, a reflection piece that was a part of this presentation group is she feels like we're starting to build those relationships in our school where teachers understand kids, they understand what their passions are, what it is. It doesn't mean that we don't want to push them and have them explore other things to make sure that that's really what they want to do. But at the same time, kids are starting to feel like they're being understood.
Absolutely. What would you suggest for, say, a district with, or at least a classroom? Let's talk about a classroom with about 25 to 30 students, right? How do you, or at least what would be your suggestions for the teachers to actually think about assessment in a different way?
Yeah, for sure. I think that really that's the key is looking at assessment and how can we authentically assess that. And if we're going to be assessing content, I think we're assessing the wrong thing. So the first thing is start looking at what are the skills that are involved in that content. And then once you identify what those skills are, then it opens up the door to what type of an assessment that might look like. I think that too often we exclude kids from that process. So the other recommendation I'd make is have a conversation with kids. Hey, we just learned about polynomials. How do you think you could demonstrate to me that you truly understand a polynomial and that you can put it into the context of your life? And the kids are going to come up with some great ideas. But you know what? We just talked about another tool that's fabulous. We have AI out there, and just kicking in our standards. One thing that I built was an AI bot where our teachers can plug in their standards, identify their skills, and then say, I want to work with the social studies teacher to create a project where we're going to have one kid, or we're going to have the kids doing one project for credit in multiple classes. And so at first thought, I think PBL or authentic assessment seems very overwhelming for teachers. But let's not forget that we've been blessed with some technology that will really help us to do that as well. And at the same time, I tell my teachers, you've got to critically look at what AI gives you and figure out what works for a ranching community versus a city community.
Absolutely. This is extremely impressive for you to create an AI bot that actually helps teachers to create what is required in the classroom, right? And I think one of my questions comes from here as well. Uh, with these new technologies and with AI emerging, they present new ways to teach these different skills that we've been talking about, right? And particularly focusing on skills. From a leadership perspective, what's the biggest challenge that you have encountered, or if you have encountered, in preparing your students, or at least your teachers as well, to feel confident in using these advanced tools?
Yeah,
And,
great question.
and not just
Um,
assessments.
yeah, I think that um, a, one of my philosophies is that I feel that superintendents and principals, our main job is to remove barriers to allow teachers to teach and students to learn. And sometimes I've been in places where administrators have created barriers instead of taking them away. So I think that that's the first thought in there is let's find ways to remove those barriers. So if a barrier is that a teacher, getting them to understand the technology, then we need to provide that. Whether that's in professional development, whether that is in them just learning from each other. We have fabulous climate and culture among our staff right now where they just truly love to learn from each other. So when somebody figures out a way to do it, they're always asking, well, hey, how did you do that? And so, again, that creating that culture is a big piece. But then you've got to provide the tools for them to be able to do that. And there are some great, I'm a big fan of YouTube University. Just you can find a lot on YouTube for free. And especially as we start to see more and more of our professional development funding, we were saturated with it during COVID years. And then now we're not. And everything has transformed in our world. Now it's like, how do we find the means to provide some of that instruction? So I still think that that's a hurdle that we're trying to figure out. How do we overcome that? And how do we provide opportunities for our teachers to do that? One thing that I also believe in providing professional development is I know early on as a principal in my career, I hated when teachers were taking days off, whether it was to go to training or just taking PTO. And now I love it and I encourage it. And I really want our teachers to have opportunities to go and to grow. And even if that's just going and looking at another school that's using AI very well, let's get our teachers there to talk with them and to explore what that looks like and to start learning from each other. I think that they come back, maybe they're gone for 2 days with some travel, but they will come back and it will be a benefit to our entire organization, to our district by learning. So I would encourage administrators to stop thinking that you're better off having the teachers in the classroom. They need to go. They need the opportunity to grow, to go see other things, to grow, to learn, and to come back and be the better teacher for their kids.
That's very encouraging, Mr. Shane. I think it's extremely encouraging to see a school leader actually pushing for professional development. Of let's talk about just learning, right? So your learning doesn't stop just because you've
Hmm.
achieved a title, right? So your learning needs to keep continuing because, again, our students are also in the same space because uh, research also suggests that at one point the student is so dependent on the teacher's expertise that the students forget how to learn, right? And
Yes.
so when you said that, okay, I really believe in YouTube University, I think we need to give our students that as well, right? For
Yeah.
them to have the ability to go beyond the classroom and learn. So,
Taking these 6 kids to New Orleans and hearing from other students and other teachers and policymakers from all over the world, I think opened up the door. Today's our first day back, and in our morning meeting where we all meet together as a secondary, they were throwing out ideas. Hey, we need to start thinking about doing this, and we need to. So when students are allowed to have a voice in their education, I really think that changes the whole game altogether.
so at the end of it, now we're almost towards the end of this podcast, but our
Yeah,
question still remains, what does success look like beyond grades, right? So,
yeah.
how would you say a child or at least a student is successful when they're, say, leaving Park County School District and they're getting out of Metitsi and they're going into the job market? What is something that you would say success would like look like for a student from your school?
I think that if we truly wanted to measure success of our kids leaving any of our schools, um, that success looks like number one, happiness. It looks like the kids are well rounded. You know, they've got great opportunities that lie ahead of them. And I don't know that I'm a advocate that not every kid needs to go to college or university, but every kid needs to continue to learn. And so, if we are producing students and graduates who leave us and have the skills to think critically, be problem solvers, they've got a great portfolio that shows creativity, and they're able to communicate. They're not going to have a hard time getting a job. They're not going to have a hard time getting accepted to the university that they want to get accepted to, or to go any path that they do. We celebrate every kid who leaves here. We had a student not too long ago that wanted to just game, and create a Stitch account and go and do it, and we promote that. It's like awesome. We want to make sure that you can be successful. If you ever change your mind, we want to make sure that you have the skills. Again, not the content. We want to make sure that you have the skills to switch and move into whether that's going back to university or anything like that. We want to make sure that you can choose that if you want to. But if you just want to go, we have a kiddo that graduated again not very long ago, and he created a food truck. He and his dad put together a food truck instead of going to school. I'm like, isn't that awesome? And then we have kids that go on the highest presidential scholarships to universities. So again, we don't measure success by a GPA, by grades. That's pretty outdated. We measure success by students being able to be productive post
Yeah.
high school.
And I think this is going to be my last question.
Yeah.
Uh, how do you convince parents that this is what learning looks like?
Yeah. You know, convincing parents is almost as hard as convincing teachers. Um, and as we've switched over and we're just in our first third month of officially being in project-based learning, there's a lot of questions that parents have. So I think that the best thing that you can do is invite them in. So we tell them you don't need to make an appointment. You pop in and say, hey, I want to see the school.
Yeah.
And you know what? We're not going to walk around with you. You want to see, you want to talk with kids, come and do it. And without fail, as we've done that, the parents come back to us and say, I get it now. I understand. This is something that I can support. And so I think you've got to see it to believe it. And too often schools are reluctant to let parents be a part of that. And so we've got to just open our doors and say, come see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and help us get better.
I think this is absolutely wonderful. And I think just having this sort of open door policy for the entire district, I think even if it's a building, it's still a building which parents can enter and actually see their kids in action, their teachers in action, feel like a part of the community, not just
For
getting
sure.
reports back, right? Like they're just
Right.
learning about it from the reports that they're getting, maybe say
Yes.
once or twice every year, but it's more than that. They're able to see impact right on hand. So thank you
Yes.
so much, Mr. Shane. I think
You are so welcome.
this conversation was extremely valuable. And I think one of the things, and maybe a final parting advice that you would like to give other school leaders who would want to begin this journey of redefining success, how should they start or where should they start from?
We would not have been successful, and we continue to make mistakes and continue to grow. But the nice thing is that we have a local school board who supports us. And so all of that pre-work has been done by administration, working with our school board for them to understand, getting them to experience what it means to see a school that looks different, that is approaching student-centered learning in a different without the support of a board who makes budgetary decisions and ultimately employment decisions. They've got to be on board, and so making sure that they understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it is pretty big.
Awesome. I think this is going to be an extremely valuable conversation that other school leaders and the leaders to be will be able to go back and look at it and try to see, or maybe even make connections with you to really understand what they can do and where they can start when it comes to actual learning, right? Like, and not
Yeah.
just with their notebooks. So, thanks once again, Mr.
Well, it's
Shane.
my pleasure.
Yeah. Any words before we part ways?
No, thank you so much for the opportunity, and feel free to reach out anytime. Always happy to. You can tell I get a little passionate and a little excited about it because learning is great.